deja vu tonight. 15 months into the pandemic, to mask or not to mask? That is the question once again. Good evening, I'm Leland Vittert. COVID's touching nearly every facet of American life again. And tonight we are digging into one basic question. When does the government's duty to protect its citizens supersede our personal freedoms? To go maskless, to see our friends and say what we want on Facebook. Speaking of Facebook, over at the White House today, President Biden completely reversed course after this jaw-dropping accusation Friday.
They're killing people. I mean, it really, look, the only pandemic we have is among the unvaccinated. And they're killing people.
In a few minutes, we're going to talk to a former DOJ official on the coming legal challenges facing all these new government mandates. But first, longtime friend and colleague Chris Stirewalt joins us from Washington, an expert on everything D.C., freedom, and American hyperbole. But the reason why we have him on today is his nearly 25 years covering politics from West Virginia and around the world. Good to see you, my friend. We're all going to remember this, hopefully in a good way. 18 months ago, February 2020, I want to take you back. You and I were both at Fox News. We would go to Vegas and put $20 on both working for a different network. President Biden is in the White House, and he's talking about Facebook killing people. We probably could have gotten some pretty good odds.
Well, they call you lucky, so I guess that makes sense. So, you know, I'll stick with you, see what you're doing.
Is there some irony here when you have President Biden saying something along the lines that is so ridiculous of Facebook is killing people at the same time talking about misinformation?
Well, the problem is that Facebook isn't killing people. Facebook is people. The problem that we're having is that we have, for a big and very successful chunk of the United States, high vaccination rates, and we're doing really well. And when you compare us to the rest of the world and other developed countries, hey, here we go. And by the way, they wouldn't have the vaccines if it wasn't for us, because it was America that made that possible. So, yay. But then you have this resistant group of folks. And the harder that Biden pushes, the harder that the government pushes against these folks, the more determined and committed they will be to not get vaccinated. So at this point, you're approaching this thing where you say, well, we're going to fight disinformation. But if what you're doing is creating among a group of people who are already skeptical about science, who are already skeptical about institutions, already skeptical about those things, if you fetishize this disinformation talk, what you will do will be entice them further into their bunkers.
So this is how President Biden today walked his statements from Friday back. Doesn't look like we have the soundbite.
I was asked that question about what do I think is happening. Facebook isn't killing people. These 12 people are out there giving misinformation. Anyone listening to it is getting hurt by it. It's killing people. It's bad information. I hope.
Haven't politicians been making that argument for a long time, that people are saying bad things and it's going to kill you if you don't believe it?
Well, I mean, stupid people are not new. We have had stupid people from the very beginning. I'm sure of that. What is different now is the speed at which they can communicate and how many of them can communicate at one time. This is very frustrating for politicians because, as we know, they would like to control the narrative and they'd like to control the discussion. This one has a difficult overlay, though, because this is a public health crisis that did kill has already killed more than 500,000, approaching 600,000 people. This is a big deal. And as it ties into what you were talking about initially, if we want to go maskless, if we want to get back to normal in the United States, we have to take advantage of this great opportunity that we have. This is frustrating for Biden.
Yeah, I know. It's clearly very frustrating for Biden. But I guess the question is this. Once the government, through Operation Warp Speed, and credit where credit is due to President Trump for having that vision and pushing that hard for a vaccine in under a year, once you offer that to everybody, isn't sort of the American way to then take a step back and say, for example, we've mandated that there be airbags in every car. We mandated that there were seatbelts in every car, but we don't have some check on your iPhone to see whether or not your seatbelt is clicked before you can turn the car on.
Well, the government certainly mandates vaccinations. Now, usually this happens at the local level, but certainly mandatory vaccinations have been part of American life for a long time. George Washington mandated that his troops be vaccinated. This is not a new idea.
Yeah.
What here the question is, can private entities, and this is where we get tangled up in the public versus private sectors here, can private entities require people to be vaccinated to go to the game, be on the plane, do those other things? Right. The anti-vaccine movement is now pushing hard against those folks. There's not going to be a federal vaccine mandate. There's no way. There's just not constitutionally a way that you could have a federal vaccine mandate. But what you will increasingly see are privileges and services for, and it will tend to be the wealthier, more elite, more educated people who are vaccinated. Those services and goods will increasingly be hard to get. And this is what we've seen in Israel, and this is what we've seen in other countries. If you aren't vaccinated, they don't want you on the plane and they don't want you in the ballpark.
A lot of things you can't do. It's almost as if we planned this. We did not, but that happens to be our next segment coming up, the legal challenges on exactly that issue. Chris Stirewalt, the perfect setup, man. Good to see you. Looking forward to having you back on the show. We appreciate it. Chris talked about how many Americans are vaccinated. 161.2 million are now fully vaccinated. Another 186 million in total have at least one shot. We want to come over here to the touch screen. 56% of Americans are somewhat now protected from the virus. And the hot spots that we are seeing now are very different than a year ago. A year ago, we were talking about New York, we were talking about Seattle, LA, Chicago, big cities. The current hotspots are here in northern and very rural parts of Florida, and then some of the most rural parts of America. Arkansas and Missouri in particular. We're going to zoom in on some of those states right now and take a look specifically at Missouri, where I'm from, and then Arkansas farther south. Here comes up the next graphic. This is Arkansas. This is the most rural part of Arkansas right here, and then down here as well, Searcy County, which does not have a high vaccination rate. And then here in Missouri, down in southwest Missouri, where they're talking about hospitals being overwhelmed in southwest Missouri, the lowest vaccination rates here, the most rural part of that state as well. This quote caught our eye in the New York Times from a nurse who wrote in the New York Times the following. She was quoted by the Times. Anthony Ayers, 26, a traveling nurse from Dallas, did not take the vaccine. Noting the vaccine development typically took years, she said she is worried that a shot might impair her fertility, even though there is no evidence of that. Speaking as to why, she said, I just think, meaning the vaccine development was rushed. Bob Driscoll joining us now for the legal battles. He worked at the DOJ, served as Assistant Deputy Attorney General under President George W. Bush. Bob, will pick up where Chris Stirewalt left off. Private companies can do pretty much whatever they want. It's the government that there can be legal challenges to, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's more risk for the government. I think private entities, most people realize, they can set their own rules in most instances, particularly with respect to health and safety concerns. The question is going to be things like, the University of Indiana that just had the decision today, or other public schools for K through 12, or other public accommodations that governments may want to require a vaccine eventually or not. And I think that's where this legal battle is going.
Let's talk about how this worked, because there were some initial legal battles to masks and to other restrictions in the very beginning of the pandemic. And you and I talked about it at that time, and you brought up this issue that the government has very broad latitude when it comes to matters of public safety and in the beginning of a pandemic. But what about now that the science is both more settled that the vaccine works, but also a little bit more up in the air in terms of really how effective mask mandates are? If you're the sheriff of Los Angeles County who says, I'm not going to enforce this new mask mandate because science doesn't support it, is there going to be a lawsuit now to try to compel him to do that?
I think that's very impractical. I mean, I think the reality is things like that, if he's not going to enforce it, there's not much the government can do about it. And I think that almost has less to do with vaccines than it has to do with, enforcement discretion of law enforcement. And if there's something that's a widespread violation that a sheriff doesn't think it's worth his time, then I think there's going to be a problem. And I think he's not going to do it. It's going to be hard to enforce, and either trying to terminate him or take other action would be all they could do. I think what's more interesting, frankly, is, the government trying to do these things, mandate vaccines for college students, for certain government employees, hospital employees, things like that, public hospitals. I think that's where you get like you said, the record is becoming more developed. I found the Indiana case very interesting today. Some students sued the University of Indiana, which is requiring vaccines. There's a federal case. The judge upheld the University of Indiana's right to require vaccinations to attend on-campus classes. But the opinion was very measured, and it looked at the data, and it indicated that things might change if the data changed.
Where do we get
that's kind of where we're at in this.
Where do we get into this sort of balance here, especially in sort of these like quasi-public-private things? I'm thinking about ballparks that may be owned by the city but managed by the baseball teams. Airlines where the planes are owned by private companies, Delta and United, but then at the same time, the FAA sets the regulations.
Right. Well, I think there's going to be I think the federal government, frankly, is not in as strong a position to do health and safety regs sometimes as local governments are. There's a complex constitutional analysis you have to go through about whether or not the federal government has authority to take given action. They can tie funds to certain things. They can certainly issue
forgive me, I've only got
guidance.
about 45 seconds left. What is the watershed moment that you look at where you'd go, oh, wow, the dynamic has really changed between who has the upper hand, the anti-maxers, pro-personal freedom versus the government?
Right. Well, I think the government's going to be presumptively have the upper hand until there is, I think there's going to be a subset of people. I think, for example, if someone challenged vaccinations under a certain age, vaccinations under 12, something like that, where there's an extremely low risk of infection without a vaccination, that somebody's going to bring a lawsuit that says, I should not expose my child to any risk to avoid such an infinitesimal risk. And I think that will be the most interesting case that we'll see coming the next couple of months.
Yeah, I have to imagine that with schools opening up and debates over masks in schools and school in person, that's going to be there. Bob Driscoll, we'll have you back to talk about exactly those issues. He served as Deputy Assistant Attorney General under President George W. Bush. Good to see you, as always. Thank you.
Congratulations, Brian.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Rural Democrats are running from their party. Quote, a growing swath of House Democrat candidates say the party needs to radically improve its heartland appeal to keep any hope of keeping power in Washington. That's from Alexi McCannon at Axios. Joining us now, co-founder of Axios, Mike Allen. I'm sure Alexi knows that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, so we thank her for writing our lead today. We appreciate it. You quoted that in your note earlier today. Every election cycle, we hear this from the party in power, right? That they're worried about answering for the most crazy among them. What makes this different?
Yeah, Leland, congratulations on launch here in your native heartland. And that's exactly where
These are my people. That's why we're talking about it. And yours, too.
That's right. Democrats are worried here in the Rockies in the South that the National Party's image, the National Party's message is so different from what voters here want. Democrats are concerned that they're going to be paying the check for defund the police for a long time. And Leland, as you know, you talk Democrats in the White House, in the Capitol. Like, they are in a rush. They know that these majorities are thin.
Hence why they're trying to push everything through so quickly. You pointed out this in your note this morning, a campaign ad, 3 minutes for Tim Ryan running for Senate in Ohio. Take a listen.
We're competing with countries around the world for jobs. So in my mind, there's nothing more patriotic than investing in our team, our people, our workers. I'm not talking about handouts. I'm talking about being prepared to win.
Did you hear something missing there, Leland?
Pop quiz, the word Democrat. You watched the whole 3 minutes, didn't hear it once.
Yeah, 3-minute ad, the word Democrat's not in there. And Leland, if you're going to watch any race in the country to see how this issue is playing out, look at this Senate race in Ohio. You have Tim Ryan, a congressman who does a very good job of straddling. He will be on Instagram doing heat yoga, and he can work a union hall, not a...
I do heat yoga. I don't think anyone wants to see that on Instagram. I'm just going out there.
And then also in this, so on the Democratic side, then on the Republican side, that's where you have J.D. Vance trying to get the Republican nomination. And he's out there talking about issues you're going to hear all over the country, and that is China, you're hearing big tech and censorship, and you're hearing inflation, populist economics. Like, that race is a microcosm of what you're exploring.
And Josh Kraushaar wrote this on Twitter, sort of following up on this. Here's Josh's tweet talking about what Tim Ryan said. And this is far away, but I'm not here as a China hawk, China bashing, but we've got a looming threat in China, Ryan said. J.D. Vance could have said that, and Donald Trump could have said a version of it. Is this the MAGA playbook?
Well, this is the playbook of people who are worried about their jobs. And that's what all those issues have in common, Leland, is people think that the world around them is changing in a way that either they don't understand or that they're going to be disadvantaged.
Right.
And of course, like that was a big part of the Trump appeal. And like we've talked for a long time, like Trump was a symptom, Trump was not the cause. And a lot of the issues that he ran on that caused people to come to him like have not been solved.
Clearly, they haven't been solved. Sort of hanging over this, and you alluded to this in the very beginning, that the base of the party, of the Democratic Party, has moved far to the left. The heartland still has stayed in the center. Nothing represents that probably to the degree in three letters that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez does, AOC. And you take a look now at her website, and I never thought I would put this up as a full-screen graphic.
She's selling merch.
AOC merch.
Yes.
There it is, AOC merch.
No, her typography, her logos, like it's being used by progressives all over the country. What she did worked, but like that exacerbates the problem for Tim Ryan, for these other
They're worried
Democrats.
about it. Is there what does history tell us about their ability to do put a bow on this? Because the moderates in the heartland have always tried to distance themselves from the crazies.
They have.
Within both parties.
You talk to Democrats and they'll tell you that they had two band-aids. One was Barack Obama, who transcended the usual Democratic message, and the other one was Donald Trump, who helped them. And I talked to Democrats today in preparation for this segment who said the only way they can keep the House is Donald Trump. They said that if he'll keep being out there with his message that elections are fixed, you shouldn't talk to pollsters, you shouldn't vote, that is the one thing that can help them.
Well, it certainly helped him in Georgia for the Senate race.
Yeah, Georgia 2.0, you nailed it.
All right. Good friends send congratulatory texts. Great friends show up on set in Chicago. It's good to see you, my friend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Appreciate it. Thank you. All right. Another big issue around the country right now, violent crime happening in every major city. And Chicagoans know that fact more than just about anywhere else. Coming up, a deep dive on crime, American culture, and is it possible to turn the tide?
Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate.
It was one of the most iconic speeches in history. Now, Florida Democrats want President Biden to seize on the Cuba crisis in that same powerful style. We're going to talk to one of those Democrats. Cuba and Chicago, two of our big stories. But first, our big premiere continues with a risque conservative adult star getting canceled by the right. What's up with that when we come back? It would appear conservatives are against cancel culture unless you are an outspoken Republican who happens to be an adult entertainment star. We're talking about Brandy Love, who tweets regularly on political issues from center right of center, and often writes about them for The Federalist. She showed up at a Turning Points USA conference this weekend, an organization that hosts events meant to, and we're quoting now, energize and grow the conservative movement. Brandy, a known conservative and Federalist writer, talked about this. Vince Coglianese, the editorial director of the Daily Caller and host of the Vince Coglianese Show, joins us from the nation's capital. Vince, good to see you. Surprising or not surprising?
I'm not that surprised that they booted her. I mean, my sense of what actually went down is this is what they refer to as a student action summit. These are high school students, somewhere in the vicinity of 15, 16 years old. That's what Turning Point cited when they talked about why they took away her VIP ticket. She had purchased a ticket to the event, and on her name tag, she represented herself not by her real name, but by her pornographic actress name, goes there, is promoting that she's there on her professional social media account, which features hardcore pornography. And I think Turning Point realized, like, look, we're an event for high school conservatives. There's an expectation that, there's got to be some moral line here somewhere. So as a result, they decided to pull her ticket. Obviously, that made this story maybe even bigger than they probably intended it to be. But I'm not surprised that they yanked it. I mean, if you can't draw the line at pornography, if you're a conservative conference, especially for young people, then where do you draw the line at all?
No one's arguing whether or not they can. Sort of, I guess the question is should you? If somebody believes in free thought and free expression and on and on and on, isn't this a conservative movement that would want anyone who could talk about those issues? In fairness, and I think we have the tweet that she put up. She was fully clothed and conservatively clothed as people at this Van Wart, Tim Young, a comedian, pointed out, how did people who are so morally opposed to pornography recognize this woman who was there, who was a pornographer? All checked in stats so far. Anti-adult haters 1, Kid Rock conservatives 12. Does this say something, though, about where the Republican Party is, in the sense that there's this talk that Dave Portnoy, El Presidente of Barstool Sports, is really the spirit animal of the Republican Party? I'm pretty sure he would not have kicked her out.
No, I think you're right. No, Dave Portnoy probably wouldn't have. I think that there's a bit of a tug of war going on between people who do like the idea of becoming a little bit more rock and roll, a little bit more, loose on some of these things. But also, I think that there's a maturation actually that's at play here, where some conservatives are finally saying, okay, look, we want a Big Ten. We want to bring in a lot of people, but we have to draw reasonable lines. I mean, pornography itself as an industry is exploitative. There's certainly, obviously, people who do it voluntarily. There's a lot of people who are taken advantage of, who are human trafficked into the industry. And consumption of it enables those very horrible things. And additionally, I think there's...
Okay, respectfully, that we can all agree. I think even perhaps even more so than news, pornography is consumed on the web. We're not ending that, and Turning Point USA is certainly not ending it by throwing Brandy Love out of their concert. This is what Ben Domenech, another conservative commentator who I know know well, says. This is what he put up. Right. I'm disappointed that TPUSA kicked out Brandy Love for no reason whatsoever. She's a Florida conservative businesswoman who loves America. The right has an opportunity to be the Big Tent party. Don't be a bunch of prudes. How do you say that we're libertarian, we're for the freedom of thought and the freedom of expression, and then say, oh, and by the way, we host events, as Turning Point USA does, that serve alcohol and everything else, but, oh, by the way, we're going to sort of discriminate against you because, by all accounts, this is a woman who's not been exploited in any way. She's a businesswoman.
Right. Well, I'll let them characterize their own politics. If they say they're libertarian, this probably isn't a libertarian move. It's not. But if they are going to say that they're socially conservative, it's consistent to think that sexual relationships shouldn't be empty ones, that we should have more meaningful relationships between men and women. And so, as a result, again, I don't think it's that controversial that a high school conference dedicated to, I think, in no small part, social conservatism would say that they don't want a pornographic actress taking advantage of that summit for her own promotional advancement.
In fairness, she's now selling T-shirts saying I was canceled by Charlie Kirk, who runs Turning Point USA. So,
right.
Somebody once said if they spell my name right, it's good publicity. So
I completely agree.
Everybody's making out okay on this one. All right, Vince, good to see you as always. We've invited Brandy Love on the show. We'll see if she takes us up on the offer later this week. Thank you.
Congrats on the show. Thank you very much, Lynn.
We'll be calling on you, man who answers the phone with just a couple of hours to airtime. We appreciate it. Coming up, our conversation with a Florida Democratic state senator taking aim at how the Biden administration is handling the crisis in Cuba. Plus, a city versus neighborhood. We're going to talk about the divorce debate in Atlanta as crime plagues one of that city's ritziest neighborhoods. And also, we'll see you on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok to continue the conversation. All of them at Leland Vittert. Welcome back. Sadly, it's been a violent weekend across the country. Here in Chicago, 11 people were killed. Another 50 were shot since Friday. The youngest victim was an 8-year-old boy riding in a car early Sunday morning. He's expected to recover. 6 other children, 4 of them teens, were shot at a graduation party. The police superintendent says drive-by shootings like the one at that party are becoming more common. In Arizona, police are investigating what led to a shooting rampage targeting first responders. A gunman killed 1 person and wounded 4 others Sunday. The 35-year-old suspect fired at paramedics near a house fire, hitting the ambulance driver and the passenger. The man then headed to the house fire and began shooting, killing 1 man, injuring a firefighter and a neighbor. The gunman fled the scene and later got into a shootout with police. He was shot by police. He's now in critical condition. And in Washington, D.C., a drive-by shooting sparked panic at a baseball game, sending players and thousands of fans scrambling to take cover.
Padres put 3 more on the board. 8-4.
What you heard there was the sound of gunfire at Nationals Park on the broadcast during Saturday night's game. The shooting left 3 people wounded, including a fan outside of the stadium. None of those injuries appear to be life-threatening. Police call it a shootout between 2 people in 2 vehicles. One of the vehicles has been recovered. The Washington Nationals and San Diego Padres resumed their game yesterday amid increased security. Outrage on Twitter was overwhelming following that shooting, but as Caleb Hull pointed out, if the same thing were to happen in Chicago, no one would bat an eye. Speaking of Chicago, 2 people who know a lot about the crime here join us now for our deep dive. Pastor Corey Brooks, founder and CEO of Project Hood, which works to end crime in underserved communities. You once spent about 3 months on a rooftop to bring awareness to the issue 10 years ago before people were talking about it. Anna Devellante is journalist here in Chicago, host of the Anna Devellante Show on WGN Radio, Emmy Award-winning reporter at a number of the stations here. We appreciate you both here. This is a good point, Pastor. It seems as though this does happen every weekend or a couple of times a weekend in Chicago, and nobody cares.
Right. It's very unfortunate that on the south side of Chicago and the west side of Chicago, we experience a lot of violence, mass shootings like no other place in America. And so it's very unfortunate. It's something that we are faced with on a consistent basis and something that we have to do something about.
It seems, Anna, almost listening to your show and the callers, people have become numb to it.
You know, numb to it is one way to say it. I would say that another thing I hear a lot is people are now very fearful. In a town that we've had crime, it's been an issue. It certainly hasn't been solved overnight or anything like that. But people now they tell me, I'm afraid to come downtown. I'm not coming downtown. Right. I'm not going anywhere outside my neighborhood anymore because there is that sort of palpable fear.
Those are the people who have the luxury of not living in the neighborhoods where the crime is happening. There's a lot of people who don't have that. Right. Is it that much worse, though, Pastor? In the 1990s, 900 people were shot and killed a year. Is it worse now, or does it just seem worse because of the big increase?
I think it's worse now. The big increase, I think the percentage-wise, all that's going on with the pandemic and with the violence, it's just a terrible situation. And so I think the fact that we have social media now covering it all, it shows more of the violence. It shows us more what's going on in the communities. And so, yeah, I really do believe it's a lot more.
This was a tweet put out by the D.C. Police Union right after the shooting at National Stadium. And we want to put it up because it is very telling what it says. Welcome to Washington, D.C., where violent crime permeates everything. It's a tragedy that elected officials won't let us do our jobs. And Anna, it seems as though there's a lot of Chicago police who feel the same way.
Yeah, I would say that the police, we just got another layer of oversight approved by City Council today. So that now is 5. You have COPA, the civilian officer, police accountability. You've got the internal affairs. You've got the federal consent decree. You've got state laws. And now you have a 5th one. And I think they would say that they feel as if their hands are tied, that more oversight isn't going to solve this problem. And they would say, in fact, some aldermen even come on my show and talk about how maybe it's time to kind of do what they're suggesting in New York, that more going after smaller crimes like curfew crackdowns and things like that might help, right?
And Pastor, this is an interesting point. We can all agree that there are bad cops. We can all agree that there's been some horrible incidents rightly brought to light over the past number of years, especially in the past 5 or 6. But is the pendulum swung too far? And now that police aren't protecting a lot of folks who need that protection in the neighborhoods you serve?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the fact that there are police who feel like their hands are tied, it allows more of the violent crimes to go on. It allows criminals to take more of an active role in our communities by taking it over. And these criminals, they're not dumb. They're very smart. They know that the police are reluctant to move on them. And so therefore, they're committing these crimes every single day and at a very hideous rate.
Anna, is there a tipping point? You've heard that from these aldermen. The mayor, as you alluded to, has put out this another layer saying that she's going to appoint a board of people to oversee and resolve disputes, which can't imagine that's going to make the police feel better. Where is the tipping point, or have we not gotten there yet?
You know, I just feel like you look at, there are short-term consequences, short-term solutions and long-term solutions. And I think long-term are some of the things you work with. You work with the community. We try to set up programs and opportunities for kids to take other paths in life, investment in communities and that kind of thing. But in the short term, I think one of the things that has to happen is that you have to start allowing for folks to see that there's a certainty of consequences. And I think when I talked to the former police superintendent, right, right? You have this situation after the Puerto Rican Day Parade. There's a couple that were pulled out of their cars and killed. Their man was out on, he ripped off his electronic monitoring bracelet. I could go through a list. A 7-year-old shot in a McDonald's electronic monitoring bracelet. Those are the kinds of people who are now out who didn't used to be, and that's what we decide is okay now.
I've got 15. Is Kim Foxx the problem?
Well, I don't know if Kim Foxx is the problem, but I do know that not prosecuting criminals is a problem, and it's something that we have to deal with. If they're not going to have consequences, they're going to keep committing crimes.
Well, that seems painfully obvious, but worth pointing out. Anna, Pastor, good to see you as always. We appreciate it. Thanks so much. All right, we're going to turn to another case study of crime. This is Buckhead, Atlanta's wealthiest neighborhood. It's trying to divorce from Atlanta and become an independent municipality. The reason? They say that the city police in Atlanta can't control the crime. Homicides in Atlanta are up 59% compared to the first 5 months of 2020, and crime is creeping into Buckhead as well. Assault is up 52% there. Thefts from vehicles are up 40%. The CEO and chair of the Buckhead City Committee, Bill White, joins us. He spent the last year investigating what it would take for Buckhead to become independent. What have you learned?
How you doing, Leland? Congratulations on your new show, On Balance and On Point. So I wish you all the best. Yeah, so what we've learned is actually those statistics is very interesting. There's a little shell game going on across the country with these statistics. We were just testifying up on Capitol Hill in Atlanta here at the state capitol for our cityhood bill. And the 3-star Atlanta police chief literally fibbed about the statistics. And in Buckhead, here's the crazy thing, Leland. In Buckhead, murders are up since 2019, 133%. Shootings are up 164%. So those stats you just put up, it's true. Those are Atlanta. But Buckhead is 3 times more than Atlanta, and it's insane.
Well, there's lies, damn lies, and statistics, so we can find something for everybody. But I guess the question for you is this really happening, or is this just a gimmick? Because we know that the police chief in Atlanta is horribly understaffed because he can't get any officers. They have hundreds of openings and no applicants essentially.
Yes, you hit the main point there, and you know why he's understaffed and no one is joining the Atlanta Police Department? Because we have a mayor in Keisha Lance Bottoms. She's announced she's leaving. God bless her. We wish her and her family well. But when she fired those 5 African-American officers for doing their job, and then she allowed them to be summarily fired without due process, and then she allowed them to be prosecuted by Paul Howard.
Yeah, you're talking about what happened during the George Floyd process. I'm looking forward, though, here. Like, really? Are you guys going to create your own city, or is this just a way to put pressure on the city of Atlanta? No, it's going to happen.
No, sir. Like, I'm a guy, as a faithful guy that believes in marriage. You work out your differences, but when you have irreconcilable differences and you've officially filed for divorce, as we say, that's final.
So have you filed?
We filed.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I signed the papers. I went down to deliver them at Keisha Bottoms' office, and she wasn't there. She hasn't been at work for a year.
All right. Well, we're going to follow the divorce proceedings to continue with the analogy. We appreciate it. Next time we'll have you to dig a little bit deeper on this. Bill White's the head of the Buckhead City Committee. Wouldn't be surprised if there's a few people who call you and try to figure out how to do this in their own cities as they worry about this.
Let's go, baby. Let's do it. We can take our cities back.
Thank you, sir. The fight for freedom continues in Cuba as Democrats demand that President Biden does more. Minutes away from our conversation with a Florida state Democratic senator who says just that.
Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate.
And then he said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. Now, Florida Democrats urging President Biden to turn the Cuba crisis into a tear down this wall moment. One of them joins us now, Democratic State Senator in Florida representing the 40th District, Annette Taddeo. We appreciate you joining us, ma'am. Simple question, is President Biden up to it?
Well, I certainly hope so. And I think this is a pivotal moment, a historic moment, a moment where we can actually bring liberty and freedom to Cuba, which is what people are screaming in the streets.
They are for sure, and they're risking their life doing it. We've got some video And we have to point out this video, some of it dates back almost a week. And that's not our fault. That's the problem. And it's probably not because there's not terrible things happening in the streets to the people who are still protesting. It's because the Cuban government has shut down the internet in Cuba. It made it almost impossible for these videos to get out. But it's easy to say we should do something. But short of U.S. airstrikes, we've already got sanctions and a blockade on U.S. goods going down there. What do we do?
Well, actually, U.S. airstrikes, in a bipartisan way, both Rubio and Menendez, both senators, one Democrat, one Republican, have said that that's really not something that's going to happen or it's an option. But we can lead the world into understanding that they have shut down the internet for a reason.
Absolutely.
They have shut it down because they don't want people to see. Yeah. Exactly. They don't want people to see all of them taking them in. I mean, over 400 people have disappeared, and those are the ones whose names we know.
Right. Exactly.
There's a bunch of others.
The misery down there is real, and you're right that for the first time in 65 years, we're seeing what communism and what a repressive government does to their people. But we lead the world how? You know, we know that China and Russia are going to veto anything at the UN of any kind of Security Council resolution. There's no way that's going to go through. We know that a number of the Europeans don't have the appetite for some kind of use of force or a naval blockade or a naval quarantine. So how do we lead other than saying we condemn things? President Biden's effectively already said that.
He has said that, but they also have said that they are looking into how we can regain the internet for many of these people, return it on. Because remember, many of these people in Cuba never even had a cell phone. It was during the Obama administration that these signals were brought in. Yep. And a lot of them were able to communicate and send us those videos that we're still getting. We're still getting videos of people being beaten up, being taken away. We are getting videos of them showing up at people's homes and taking their kids,
pulling people out,
young kids, so that they can serve in the army and actually fight their own Cuban people.
Right, and we're hearing stories of people being told if you don't go out and beat those in the streets, we're going to take away your job or we're going to take away your kids. I wanted to put up this tweet because there is this gap in the Democratic Party in terms of what to do something. Republicans are united about Cuba. Obviously, it was President Obama that you brought up that opened up Cuba and thought that the economic reforms would change things. All it's done is enriched and emboldened the regime there. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, we stand in solidarity with the Cuban people and condemn the suppression of the media, speech, and protests. We also call for an end to the U.S. embargo and additional Trump-era restrictions that are profoundly contributing to the suffering of the Cubans. So is it the Biden administration's fault, or should they ratchet up the sanctions?
Listen, we can have a debate about the embargo, and it's a debate that we should have. But right now, what is not up for debate is that the Cuban government, the actual repressive communist government, is the one that's actually holding people up. All the political prisoners, I mean, they're holding people up simply because they do art that's critical of the government, because they write a rap song that's critical of the government. I mean, imagine if we did that here. We'd all be out in the streets as well, claiming liberty. And that's all they're asking for is freedom. So we need to absolutely make sure that they have internet service like we have done in other countries, but we also need to lead with our voices and pressure other countries into understanding that this romanticized feeling about Cuba, that, we think that it's so different than it actually is. Just watch the videos, just speak to the people. Like I spoke to one of them in the island today. That is the reality, and that's not up for debate.
Well, we know how Justin Trudeau felt about Fidel Castro when he died. So there is some education perhaps around the world to be done about what's going on in Cuba. Madam Representative, we appreciate it. It was nice to see you. Florida State Senator Annette Taddeo with us, and you've been talking about this for a while. We'll have you back to do it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to see you, ma'am. All right, so first night. How'd we do? Up next, final reflections on night one of this adventure. Movies like I, Robot, The Terminator, and Ex Machina have perhaps rightly instilled fear of a robot apocalypse. But Boston Dynamics is hoping to change that with their new promotional video for its humanoid robot that they call Atlas. So if they can do that now, imagine what they will be doing just a few short years from now. They are better dancers than I, and on that note, I promise to never dance on this show. But we do have a quick note before we go about tonight's first show. Thanks for being here. We're glad to have you here with us. Without all of you, all of our work, the fancy production, careful research is for naught. As Tom Brokaw said, I am simply the most conspicuous part of this large team. And we are grateful for your time and your trust. We pledge to earn it every show. And to that end, we will approach every night without fear or favor to those we interview or the stories we cover. And while you might not always agree with our guests or our point of view, we do hope you'll be smarter for the discussion. I'll see you here tomorrow night. Marnie and Rob are next.